What's up, you guys? This is Devin from CenturyFX Studios, and we're back with another video. Today we're going to be talking about the response that I got on my video today from a viewer named EDM Deposit. So basically they were saying something along the lines of, oh, well, you're holding a lens that's very, very old. I'm sure if you had actually got a STM lens, it would actually give you a little bit more decent image quality. And yes, you are correct to a certain extent. My whole reason in making that kit lens is so bad video is to highlight the things that the lens hinders from the camera. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have a kit lens. I'm not saying you shouldn't purchase one. I am saying you have to be well aware of what that kit lens is actually doing to your camera, and stating that there's more STM lenses that are kit lenses that are better quality, that operate a little bit better, is not the overarching picture. More than anything, the thing that differentiates a lens is essentially the aperture, and I can't say it any other way. The aperture is a huge part of why people upgrade the lens. Matter of fact, it's probably one of the only reasons why people upgrade the lens is for the aperture, because the aperture can actually constitute an upgrade in a camera. It can be the difference between you going from a crop frame sensor to a full frame sensor, even from a micro four thirds sensor to a full frame sensor, or even a full frame sensor to a medium format sensor. That leap of image quality constitutes another camera. That's how important the lens is. So when you get a kit lens and you buy it with a camera and you zoom in, you are no longer retaining the amount of light that you originally had when you had it always zoomed out to the 18mm in. Now when you go to 55mm, you're looking at a 5.6. That's a whopping amount of light that just got stolen from you just because you zoomed in. You might be saying, well, that's what they have to do. It's a kit lens. Well, the kit lens is the only one that actually does that. Those variable aperture kit lenses are the only ones that do that. Now, there's some other lenses that third parties make, and some Canon and Nikon and the primary brands make that actually are variable aperture. But none of those lenses actually absorb as much light as the kit lens does when you zoom in. As a matter of fact, you made a comparison to the kit lens that I had in my hands, the STM lenses that they have on the market. Yes, of course they have IS. Yes, they have STM, better motors. It's silent, it's stable, it has a better image quality. It probably focuses just a little bit faster, but it probably doesn't even focus that much faster. But think about it in the whole grand scheme of things. Would you rather have let's see, a 2.8 aperture than a 3.5 to 5.6 aperture? Like I said before, my whole reason was to let you understand what the variable aperture did to your image quality and how much you're losing when you upgrade your camera. Because when people upgrade their cameras, from the cell phones, and they get the DSLRs that automatically come with these kit lenses, that stifles that DSLR, because that DSLR can do so much more with that huge sensor inside of it that you never know. So you spend all this money thinking about the camera and how it's going to upgrade your image quality, when it's actually the lens that's doing all the upgrading in retrospect. So when you think about it, okay, so if you had a 1.8 lens on a kit camera, or an APS-C sensor camera, or those cameras that come with the kit lenses, you would actually get closer to full frame quality out of that lens, out of that camera. You'd get a lot more out of that camera, but the manufacturers don't really want you to know why they're not making a lot of 1.8 lenses for APS-C bodies, because that will stifle their full frame lineup. There's a tier, there's a class for everything. Canon is one of the worst brands when it comes to upgrading their technology. So when you buy that T3i like you did about 10 years ago, when you buy that 60D or 7D and T4i and T5i, you're gonna realize that all 6, 7 of these cameras have the same, or 5 to 7 cameras have the same 18 megapixel sensor. That Canon never really upgraded it. They just kept rehashing the exact same sensor. They gave you autofocus and video, and they thought, oh, we can just redo the sensor over and over and over again. Sorry, I got some flies going on here. But the thing about it is, everything comes in a class, no matter what. If it's a kit lens, it's going to be stifled no matter what. It's going to have some of the worst image quality in low light, and that's what people really want to see. They want to see image quality. They want to see dynamic range. Sharpness is not the biggest of all deals nowadays. Why? Because you have 24 megapixel cameras. You have, 40 megapixel cameras. If you have a kit lens on a 24 megapixel camera, that's going to be way better than a kit lens with a 18 megapixel camera, because that sensor has more resolution on it. It's just going to be better. So you don't necessarily need all the sharpness out of the lens. You don't need all those little things like IS as much. You don't need, let's see. Well, if you're doing video, you're probably going to need IS a little bit more than somebody that's doing photography. But let's think about IS, because you did mention IS as a factor of why you would want, the newer lenses over the older ones. Well, IS can help you in some cases, but it can't help you in a lot of other cases. Think about the 18 to 135 STM kit lens. That sucker has a 135 end on it for the telephoto. More you zoom in, the more shaky your image actually becomes. So when you need aperture to alleviate some of those other settings like shutter speed, it's not there. So not only are you being stifled by your aperture, which all the kit lenses since 2003 have done this, they're like, oh, we're going to give you IS, but we're still going to have that aperture variation. I'm like, even if you give me IS, the lens is still shooting itself in the foot because it can't get to 2.8 or it can't maintain a 3.5. As a matter of fact, the new STM lenses that you mentioned only get as wide as f4. Well, if it only gets as wide as f4, and we used to be able to get f3.5 on these lenses, why can't we just get a constant f4 and make the lens a little bit bigger and bring it up about $100? And because it becomes really, really frustrating with especially a brand like Canon, which I've been shooting with for about 12 years now. It becomes very frustrating to have a kit lens because a kit lens really stifles the camera, and Canon doesn't come up with any technology that's cheaper to help you understand that. Oh, excuse me, to help you compensate for that. So let me make another example. Since this new STM lens that you boast about, I'm pretty sure it has better chromatic aberration. It fights that chromatic aberration off. It probably has better image stabilization. Or image stabilization in general, because the one I had in my hand didn't. But like I said, probably 5 stops of image stabilization. But in the grand scheme of things, when you're taking pictures of people, which most people are taking pictures of people, just go to Instagram. You can see that every day, all day. People are taking more pictures of other people than anything else, more than landscapes, more than, stars and all that stuff. People take pictures of people. IS really doesn't help you a lot when it comes to taking pictures of people. Shutter speed helps you way more than IS will. And what can alleviate your shutter speed? You can get a higher shutter speed if you have a wider aperture. If you have an f1.8 lens, like say for example the 50 to 100 Sigma f1.8, you can get way more image quality out of it than if you had a f3.5 to 5.6 18 to 35 millimeter lens with that variable aperture. You're stifling yourself. No matter how many stops of image stabilization you have, it's not going to let you bring in the amount of light, so these other settings like ISO will be better. You see what I'm saying? Like, ISO is so much more important than image stabilization, like your camera's ability to be able to resolve a certain amount of light, because your camera is a light receiving device. So the more your camera has to amplify, which is your ISO, your gain, the worse your image quality is going to be. Now, they can stabilize the image as much as they want to via the lens, and even though inner body stabilization is better, the lens is decent for this example, it's still not going to give you the image quality that you need. And I'm going to just leave off on this last example. For example, if you wanted to get a high performance vehicle in the real world, and you have a Toyota Camry, which is one of the most popular vehicles known to man, a Toyota Camry, and you're trying to upgrade. Hey, let me get the Toyota Camry S Edition because it's a sport. It's a high performance vehicle, right? Well, that Toyota Camry is more like a kit lens. The real L lens is more like a Ferrari F50. Now, the Ferrari F50, I believe it's maybe the first or the only one they ever made, was in 1995. 1995 was a long time ago, more than 14 years ago. So it's a high performance vehicle. That Toyota Camry is never going to outperform that F50 in speed if that's what you're going for. And you know, when you're talking about aperture with lenses, it's talking about speed. So I'm saying it's a class thing. It's not necessarily, oh, well, they're giving you image quality this time. They're giving you IS this time. They're giving you this. No, they're still not going to give you that aperture that you want. Think about the full frame camera. The full frame has a kit lens, the 24-105 f4, constant aperture lens. Why do you think that lens is constant aperture, but the one on the kit lenses are not? Because it's about keeping the kit lens down and boosting the full frame bodies up. The same thing with the cinema line. Why don't you think we have 4K in all of our smaller form Canon cameras? I mean, 4K has been mainstay for almost, 3 to 5 years now. Why don't you think that Canon, you see what I'm saying? So you have to think about it in the sense of marketing. It's not so much about the little things that they give you, because that's what they want you to think. They want you to think that IS is the way to go. Oh, we give you IS this time. Oh, we give you, SDM motor, but we're going to take away that aperture. It's no longer 3.5 at the wide end, it's f4 now. So you're losing a third of a stop of light when at the end of the day, the camera is a light receiving device. Even in the film days, it's a light receiving device. It has to have light to have better image quality. So you can have the sharpest lens at f8, but if you're not having enough light to expose that image, no matter what raw image that you take, you jack that sucker up all the way up, it's still not going to give you the image quality that you want because you didn't have enough light to expose the image in the first place exactly like you needed to. So now your camera is replacing what should have been lit pixels with noise and a degradation of colors. You're talking about sharpness, you won't even recognize who that person is because all of the pixels that should have been lit pixels and pixels resolving a certain color is now purplish. It's muddy, it's cruddy, and all this other stuff. So, like I said, the Ferrari F50 is in one class like a Canon L lens with a 1.8 aperture or 2.8 aperture or whatever aperture. And the kit lenses like the Toyota Camry is in its own class. Now, you can get IS, you can get the Sport Edition of the Toyota Camry. I mean, it's still going to be a Toyota Camry. You're still losing. Matter of fact, like I said before, you're losing way more light than you actually did before. Or 1/3 of a stop, but you do have newer sensors. But like I said, sensor technology does not improve as fast as the lens can get that light to your sensor. If I had a 1.8 aperture on an old camera, I would want that old camera more so than that new camera if they had the same sensor size. Because technology in the camera sensors do not compensate as much as letting more light with your lens in. So I know I went on a little rant. I don't mean to be offensive or anything like that. It's EDM deposit. I'm not trying to scold you. I'm just trying to defend my last video, telling you guys, yes, kit lenses can be decent sometimes. I don't mean to down kit lenses and say, oh, they're the worst thing ever in the world and don't buy them. Sometimes you have no other choice, and kit lenses are actually half decent backups if you're not at 3.5 or 5.6. If you're at f8, if you can be in the studio, I can use a kit lens all day and get away with some great images for my clients, even professional work. Even if I wanted to do some kind of commercial work, I could probably get away with the kit lens if I wanted to, if I were very crafty about how I lit my subject. It's all about how much light you're able to let in at a certain amount of time. But a lot of people don't have a lot of strobes and soft boxes, and a lot of times it's not convenient to set up a whole bunch of stuff just to feed that kit lens a lot of light. Because like I said, 3.5 to 5.6 is a bunch of light to lose. And if you just had a constant aperture lens, it doesn't necessarily even have to have stabilization, because we have stabilization products that will help you out in some cases. But it's just, you have to understand what you're losing with that kit lens. And just because you upgrade your body doesn't mean your kit lens is at your best benefit. And the marketers won't tell you this. And that's all I was trying to say in the last video. Like I said, guys, I know I was ranting for a little bit. It's not to offend anybody. I'm just trying to defend my point. I'm Devin with CenturyFX Studios, guys. Stay tuned for the next video. I am still working on my softbox video. I just stopped working on the scripts and stuff to actually address this one comment that I got today. All right, guys. Stay tuned.